My name was Amin. I was a Quran teacher. Firmly rooted in tradition, I sat at the pinnacle of my community's respect and adherence to Islamic law. By 35, I had dedicated my life to shaping minds and nurturing souls within the confines of our sacred mosque. Yet, beneath my composed exterior, a storm raged. A hollow agony throbbed inside me, an unrelenting quest for a divine connection I could not find. For too long I obeyed the rituals, recited the verses, and pressed my forehead to the ground in submission, all the while feeling the binds of doubt tighten around my heart. During prayers, shadows twisted in the corners of my mind, whispering questions I dared not voice. Was this truly the path to enlightenment? Or merely a facade, an intricate web designed to control my spirit? Then came the night that tore my world apart. While reciting the Quran, disaster struck. A sudden tremor. I felt the earth shift beneath me, and then it all faded to black. In my coma, I drifted into a realm of darkness, where I was confronted not by the void, but by the blinding light of Jesus, who called my name with an intimacy I had never known. He didn't come to me as a judge, but as a guide, revealing the layers of illusion that cloaked my understanding. I witnessed a world unseen, a fierce spiritual battle hidden behind the veil of religion. I saw the binding chains of the very beliefs I clung to, their true purpose unveiled. In that moment, I recognized I had thrown my devotion into the pit of a system, not into the arms of God. Upon waking, the weight of His revelation crashed down upon me, leaving me estranged from my own family, my community. I became a pariah, labeled a heretic for daring to question what was always held sacred. But I also became alive, ignited with a profound purpose, a conviction pulsing through my veins. This path was not just mine, it was a calling meant to awaken others shackled by deception. Before we dive deeper into this journey, pause and reflect. Where are you watching from right now? What time does this moment hold for you? Leave a comment below. Let's connect across distance. And if your heart stirs with the echoes of truth, join me by subscribing to Truth from Beyond. This is not merely a testament, it is a declaration. And the revelations that lie ahead will resonate beyond the veil of understanding. In a conservative neighborhood in Mecca, Saudi Arabia, I dedicated my life to the teachings of the Quran as a respected teacher. The atmosphere around me was thick with reverence and fear, a tapestry of strict adherence to Islamic traditions that dictated our daily lives. Each morning I would enter the mosque, feeling the weight of expectation pressing down on my shoulders. My role was to guide my students through the intricacies of our faith, instilling in them the values and practices that had been passed down through generations. Yet, beneath this facade of confidence, I struggled with a sense of emptiness that I couldn't shake. As I recited verses from the Quran, a familiar void loomed within me. I often found myself lost in thought, questioning whether my understanding of faith was truly genuine or merely a performance upheld by tradition. The more I wrestled with these sentiments, the heavier the burden of expectation felt. I longed for a connection with the divine that transcended ritual, yearning for something more profound, something that could provide clarity amidst the confusion. This unease settled in my bones, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. One night, during my evening prayers, everything changed. I was deep in contemplation, reciting the sacred words, when an overwhelming sense of darkness enveloped me. Suddenly, I felt detached from my surroundings, as if the walls of the mosque had dissolved into nothingness. In the midst of that unsettling void, a brilliant light broke through, and I found myself standing before Jesus. His presence radiated an indescribable warmth, dispelling the shadows of doubt that had plagued me for so long. When he looked at me, I felt an immediate connection, as though he understood every fear and longing deep within my soul. In that moment, Jesus began to reveal profound truths. Truths about the spiritual war that raged within me and around me. He spoke of the hidden agendas of the elite, men and women in power, who used deception to manipulate our faith and control our lives. I was shown the societal structures that perpetuated division, how fear was wielded as a weapon to keep communities from uniting in love and understanding. The revelations were both alarming and liberating, illuminating the darkness I had felt for so long. I understood then that my struggle was not just against personal doubt, it was part of a larger battle against the deception keeping so many of us in chains. When I returned to consciousness, I was back in the mosque, the familiar surroundings seeming surreal after my encounter. The experience lingered in my mind like an echo, urgent and transformative. I knew I had been given a mission, a calling to unravel the layers of deception that had clouded my community's understanding of faith. I felt an overwhelming need to share what I had learned, to awaken others to the truth that existed beyond their limited perceptions. But the fear of backlash loomed over me. How could I speak out against traditions that my family and community held dear? Would they see me as a traitor? Or could my revelations offer them the hope they too longed for? As I grappled with these questions, a mixture of excitement and trepidation filled my heart, compelling me to embrace my path, trusting that the light I had found could guide others from the shadows into a new awakening. As a 35-year-old Quran teacher, I was well respected in my community, a figure of authority that others turned to for guidance. I wore the mantle of my position with pride. After all, I was fulfilling a duty entrusted to me by my family and society. Each day I stood before my students, imparting the teachings that had shaped my life from a young age. However, beneath this surface of confidence and respect lay an inner turmoil I struggled to articulate. A profound sense of spiritual emptiness grew inside me, gnawing at my soul. I felt trapped by religious rules that dictated my every move, with little room for introspection or genuine faith. The burden of expectation often felt oppressive. I recited verses and performed rituals, but there was a growing disconnect between my actions and my emotions. While my community revered strict adherence to tradition, I increasingly questioned whether these practices fostered a deeper understanding of the divine or merely served as a mechanism for compliance. The silence surrounding my doubts became unbearable, and I sensed a spiritual war raging within me. Each prayer I uttered felt like an empty echo, reinforcing a longing for something more that remained just out of reach. Then, one fateful day, during a solemn moment of recitation, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. As I spoke those sacred words, I felt an overwhelming wave of heat wash over me, as if the world around me was disappearing. In an instant, I found myself in darkness, only to be met with an astonishing light. In that radiant glow stood Jesus, and I could hardly believe my eyes. His presence enveloped me in warmth, and as he looked at me, I felt a sense of profound peace mixed with raw vulnerability. He called my name, urging me to listen, and in that moment, all my questions surged to the forefront of my mind. Jesus began to reveal the hidden agendas that kept people like me bound within the shackles of tradition. I was shown how elites manipulated dogma to control and deceive, creating systems that fostered division rather than unity. As I witnessed these truths unfold, the weight of deception lifted from my heart, replaced by an acute awareness of the spiritual war being waged not just in my life, but also across the globe. I saw how manipulation and propaganda fueled conflict, how fear was wielded as a weapon to keep us compliant. When I returned to consciousness, I was left reeling from the revelation. My heart raced with a mixture of hope and fear. Hope because the truths I had seen promised awakening. Fear because I now knew I had a responsibility to share what I had learned. As I resumed my role teaching Quranic lessons, my perspective had shifted dramatically. No longer could I simply recite verses without understanding their implications. I felt compelled to explore this newfound faith in Jesus and the profound love I had experienced. Yet, I was acutely aware of the consequences. The risk of rejection from my community, the potential loss of my position, and the isolation that could follow that revelation. I steeled myself for the battle ahead, knowing that the journey toward truth would demand courage in the face of everything I had ever known. As I stood in the mosque, reciting familiar verses of the Quran during prayer, a profound void began to creep into my heart. I am Amin, a Quran teacher dedicated to my faith and community. Yet in those moments, doubt gnawed at me, transforming the sacred words into mere echoes. I found myself questioning the very beliefs that had framed my identity. It felt as if I was drifting through a haze, unable to grasp the essence of my spirituality. The prayers that once brought me solace now left me feeling hollow, and the expectations of my students and community loomed heavily over me, suffocating the flicker of doubt that had ignited within. Each night, those doubts transformed into unsettling dreams. I would wake in a cold sweat, the lingering image of an angelic figure calling my name resonating in my mind. There was an undeniable pull toward this figure, a gentleness that belied the fear and confusion brewing in my spirit. In these dreams, the figure was often accompanied by messages that challenged everything I had been taught. I was not merely opening my mind to new ideas. I was being thrust into a revelation of truths hidden behind layers of tradition and expectation. With every dream, I could feel the tension between my upbringing and this new awakening intensifying. The conflict reached a boiling point one fateful night as I lay in bed, struggling to reconcile my dreams with my reality. I awoke not in the peaceful confines of my room, but in what felt like a desolate expanse, a dark desert. It was here that the luminous figure appeared again, this time revealing himself more clearly. It was Jesus. His presence illuminated the space, dispelling the darkness around me and filling me with an indescribable sense of peace. As he stepped closer, I felt the weight of the spiritual war one had been fighting. He began to unveil the deceptions I had been subjected to, peeling back the layers of my beliefs like the pages of an ancient book. In that surreal moment, I witnessed a revelation where the deeper truths about our society unfolded before me. Jesus showed me how the hidden agenda of the elite manipulates our faith, framing our understanding of spirituality as a means of control. I saw the ways in which our beliefs had been weaponized, dividing families and communities, fostering fear rather than love. The urgency of his message resonated within me, urging me to awaken from the slumber of compliance and embrace a path filled with love and connection. The truths I witnessed hung heavily in the air, demanding action from someone finally willing to confront the darkness. As I returned to reality, still reeling from the encounter, I realized that my life would never be the same. I struggled to comprehend the implications of what I had just experienced. How could I share these revelations with my community when even contemplating the truth felt like stepping onto a tightrope? I sensed the immense risk that lay before me, but even more pressing was the desire to help others navigate their own spiritual battles. I was compelled to reach out, to connect with those around me who might also feel trapped in a cycle of tradition and deception. Would I have the courage to voice my experiences, or would that fear keep me imprisoned in silence? As I pondered these questions, a resolve began to take shape within me, propelling me toward the clarity I so desperately sought. The narrative takes a pivotal turn during a typical prayer session at the mosque, when an earthquake shook the very foundations of my reality. I was reciting verses from the Quran, surrounded by familiar faces, each of us lost in our devotion, when the ground beneath us began to tremble violently. The sudden chaos transformed the serene atmosphere into one of panic and confusion. I struggled to maintain my footing as the walls shuddered, but before I knew it, everything blurred around me, and I collapsed into darkness. The next thing I remember was plunging into an abyss of silence, a void that both terrified and intrigued me. In that stillness, I experienced a sensation unlike anything I'd felt before, an overwhelming weightlessness that liberated my spirit. As I drifted deeper into the void, a brilliant light broke through the darkness, illuminating everything around me. From the light emerged the figure of Jesus, radiating warmth and love that enveloped me completely. In that moment, all my worries and doubts melted away, and I felt a blissful connection to something far greater than myself. Jesus approached me with a gentle smile, and as he looked into my eyes, I felt the depth of his understanding. In that sacred space, he began to unveil the hidden truths about the world we live in, a world riddled with a deceptive narrative crafted by those in power. He revealed to me the existence of a spiritual war that transcended the physical realm, a battle being waged against the very essence of humanity. I saw glimpses of how the elite manipulates faith and fear to maintain control, sowing division and misunderstanding among people. Each revelation struck me like a bolt of lightning, illuminating the dark corners of my consciousness. The more he revealed, the more I felt an urgency rising within me. I witnessed the consequences of this deception. Communities fractured by ideology, families torn apart by beliefs that society had imposed on them. Lords of wealth used their power to orchestrate chaos, distancing individuals from the truth of love and unity that Jesus represented. I realized that my entire life had been built on blocks of ignorance and compliance, and the revelation was a rallying call to awaken, not just for myself but for everyone ensnared by the same system of fear. As the light began to fade, I felt myself being pulled back toward consciousness. The warmth of Jesus remained imprinted on my heart, and the urgency of his message echoed in my mind. I awoke back in the mosque, surrounded by chaos and confusion. But now, everything felt different. The revelation I had received burned brightly within me. I understood then that my journey was not simply about personal faith. It was a mission to illuminate the hidden truth and guide others out of darkness. I felt compelled to share what I had learned, despite the potential backlash from my community. The stakes had never been higher, and the tension gripped me tightly. I knew I needed to speak out, but would my voice be strong enough to break through the deafening silence of conformity? As I rose to my feet amidst the confusion, that question lingered, igniting a flame of determination within me. Upon waking from the coma, the world felt both familiar and alien. The sterile hospital room was a jarring contrast to the ethereal light I had experienced during my encounter with Jesus. I had been shown profound truths during my near-death experience. Truths about love, unity, and the deceptive currents shaping our lives. Yet, as I attempted to reintegrate into my life, I was met with harsh realities. My family, my community, all branding me a heretic for my newfound beliefs. Their rejection cut deeper than I ever anticipated, sending me spiraling into an internal struggle that felt insurmountable. I felt trapped between two worlds, the traditional values instilled in me since childhood and the revolutionary insights I had gained. My role as a Quran teacher had always defined me. I was expected to uphold the teachings of my faith with unwavering loyalty. Now, however, my heart was pulled toward a different truth, one that stood in stark contrast to everything I had been taught. The more I tried to reconcile these conflicting beliefs, the more I felt like an outsider in my own life, wrestling with a sense of isolation that threatened to overwhelm me. In the early days after my awakening, the weight of what I had experienced threatened to suffocate me. The atmosphere of my local community was thick with disapproval and misunderstanding. Friends turned to strangers, their faces conveying disbelief and contempt. I often found myself in solitary moments, haunted by memories of what had transpired in that transformative encounter. The light, the love, the powerful voice of Jesus calling me to a higher understanding. It was maddening. I could see the hidden agenda behind the teachings I'd always held dear, and yet those around me were blissfully unaware, trapped in their own spiritual war against questioning and doubt. Seeking solace, I turned inward, reaching out to Jesus in desperate prayers, hoping for guidance. At night, I revisited the moments when he had revealed the hidden deceptions that held so many captive. I reflected on how the elite manipulated our beliefs, driving wedges between communities, nurturing fear instead of compassion. It burned within me to share these revelations, to dismantle the walls built around people's hearts. But the fear of alienation from those I loved loomed large. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a precipice, peering into an abyss of uncertainty, desperately wondering if I would ever find my way back to the community I once knew. Little by little, I began to explore my beliefs, seeking out others who might share this journey. I found online forums, whispered discussions, and pockets of individuals grappling with similar transformations. Each conversation fortified my resolve. It felt as though the universe was opening doors, urging me to embrace this path. Yet, even as I found connection, the shadow of rejection from my family loomed large. How could I hope to bridge that gap? Could my commitment to the truth be the very thing to bring us back together, or would it serve as an insurmountable wall? As I accepted my role as a messenger of this newfound truth, I felt an exhilarating urgency to serve others, to show them that love and unity could triumph over fear and division. My journey had ignited a passion within me that I could no longer ignore. As I prepared to share my story, the question still pounded at the back of my mind. What if I failed? What if my revelations fell on deaf ears? Or worse, what if the very people I aimed to help succumbed to the deceptions I longed to dismantle? As I stepped forward, the tension between hope and fear intensified, an unyielding force pushing me toward the unknown path ahead. Driven by a quest for truth, I reached a breaking point that shattered the conformity of my life as a Quran teacher. The questions that had lingered in the corners of my mind grew unbearable. Each day, as I recited sacred texts, I felt a profound void that gnawed at my spirit. I longed for something deeper, something more genuine than the rituals I'd practiced for so long. It was in those moments of desperation that I started to clandestinely explore the Bible. The idea felt reckless, even dangerous, yet the pull toward this forbidden text was irresistible. At first I would read in silence, hidden away from prying eyes. The pages were filled with stories that stirred something inside me, a thirst for connection with something greater. As I flipped through the scriptures, I stumbled upon verses that spoke of love, redemption, and a truth that transcended the confines of tradition. It felt as if the words were written just for me, beckoning me to a path I had never considered. Each line pulled me deeper into a world where Jesus was not just a historical figure, but a living embodiment of love and grace, challenging everything I had known. Alongside this exploration, I began watching videos of ex-Muslims who had converted to Christianity. Their testimonies resonated deeply, echoing my own struggle with identity and faith. They spoke of miraculous encounters with Jesus, transformative experiences that turned their lives upside down and gave them a sense of belonging that had eluded them for so long. I listened intently, captivated by their courage, their revelations sparking a flicker of hope in my heart. The realization hit me. I was not alone in this journey, and countless others had faced similar dilemmas in their quest for truth. In finding this supportive community, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. Together we shared our fears and doubts, forming bonds that transcended the divisions imposed by society. I began to understand that the spiritual war we faced was not just within me, it was collective, a struggle against the hidden agendas that kept us shackled. The elite thrived on our division, manipulating our beliefs and sowing seeds of confusion. It was time to awaken from the slumber of compliance and embrace the truth we were uncovering together. As I connected with others, a mission crystallized in my heart, a mission to share the love of Jesus and the revelations we had collectively received. Yet, even as I embraced this new identity, the fear of rejection from my family clawed at the edges of my consciousness. My heart ached for the acceptance I had known, and the thought of losing that comfort for the sake of truth was daunting. Would my family understand the awakening I was experiencing, or would they cast me out as a traitor to our traditions? Each day became an exercise in courage, a delicate balance of standing firm in my new beliefs while navigating the fragile ties that bound me to my past. I knew I had to confront this fear, to articulate my journey to those who still clung to their dogmas. As I prepared to step out into a world that felt increasingly hostile, I felt a rising tension. Would the truth I now held in my heart bring about healing or heartache? The answers remained shrouded in uncertainty, but the urgency to embrace my path burned brighter than my doubts. Recognizing my experience as a divine calling ignited a fire within me that I could no longer ignore. As a Quran teacher, my life had revolved around guiding my students through the teachings of our faith. Yet, after witnessing the light of Jesus during my near-death experience, the pressures of expectation and conformity began to feel suffocating. This encounter opened my eyes to truths I had never considered, an awakening that showed me the spiritual war being waged around us, a struggle against the hidden agendas crafted by the elite who control narratives and sow fear among the masses. In the days following my awakening, I found myself grappling with an urgent desire to share my story, to reveal the revelation that had transformed my understanding of faith and spirituality. I wanted to speak out against the machinery of deception that kept my community entrapped. With each passing day, the weight of my silence grew heavier. I felt compelled to articulate the love and freedom I had found in Jesus, yet the risk was exacerbating my fear. The thought of my family and community branding me a heretic, or worse, threatening my life, loomed over me like a dark cloud. I often revisited the moments of clarity from my encounter. Jesus had shown me how the elite manipulate society, maintaining a stronghold on people through religious dogma and fear-based tactics. I had come to understand how these hidden agendas perpetuated wars, societal division, and a sense of hopelessness among the faithful. It was a staggering realization, one that fueled my determination to awaken others to the truth. The thought of standing beside my fellow believers, guiding them out of darkness, filled me with hope, but the thought of doing so alone was terrifying. I could hear the whispers of doubt echoing in the recesses of my mind. Despite my fears, the drive to share and spread what I had discovered began to permeate my thoughts. In my solitude, I sought out small gatherings where fellow seekers could share their journeys. I felt buoyed by the connections I was forming, relationships built on mutual understanding and the courage to challenge existing norms. We exchanged stories of our struggles, the pain of rejection, and the exhilaration of awakening. Each testimony brought tears to my eyes, amplifying my conviction that love and truth must prevail over fear and division. As I prepared to voice my own revelations, the fear of the repercussions threatened to paralyze me. Would I be able to stand before others, sharing the love of Jesus and the truths that had set me free? Or would the threat of backlash silence me? The tension was palpable. I could feel it in every fiber of my being. Yet, amid the turmoil, a flicker of hope ignited within. I understood that change often requires courage in the face of adversity. The journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, but the potential for transformative healing, both for myself and for my community, urged me onward. The call was clear, pushing me to embrace this spiritual awakening and trust that I was not just a vessel of truth, but also a conduit for love in a world starved for it. I made the decision to leave my old life behind, a symbolic act that felt both liberating and terrifying. As a Quran teacher, I had spent years building my identity around my faith, my community, and the values instilled in me since childhood. But after my encounter with Jesus, during that life-altering experience, everything changed. No longer could I carry the weight of a name tied to old beliefs that no longer resonated with my heart. I chose to change my name, an outward reflection of the transformation within. I understood that my journey was just beginning. Claiming a new identity was my declaration that I was ready to embrace the truth and live out my newfound faith boldly. Each day after the change felt like stepping into uncharted territory. I began to encounter hostility from those around me, fellow teachers, friends, and even family, who viewed my transformation as a betrayal of our shared beliefs. The rejection pierced my heart, yet I remained steadfast in my commitment to follow the path Jesus had illuminated for me. The spiritual war one had sensed for so long came to life as I navigated these turbulent waters. I discovered that sharing my testimony was not just about me. It was about opening doors for others who had once felt trapped in the same cycle of doubt and deception. With this new mantle of an evangelist, I felt an undeniable responsibility to help others experience their own awakenings. I began organizing small gatherings where individuals could explore their doubts and fears in a safe environment. It was during these sessions that I witnessed the power of community, the healing that comes from shared truth and vulnerability. Each person's story added depth to the tapestry of our collective awakening. I shared my experiences, my revelations about the hidden agenda that often manipulated our beliefs, and how the elite thrived on division and fear. With every meeting, I felt hope blossom among us, a silent promise that we could transcend the bindings of our pasts. But even as I worked to inspire hope in others, The gnawing fear of losing everything I had ever known haunted me. I often reflected on my family and their reaction to my transformation. How could I explain the truth I had embraced when I could barely understand it myself? The thought of standing up and sharing my beliefs with those who once viewed me as a pillar of our community filled me with trepidation. I was torn between my desire to bridge the gap wrapped in love and the fear of confrontation that could lead to alienation, even danger. Yet I couldn't ignore the reality of the spiritual war we faced. I had been given a voice and I felt compelled to use it. As I ventured deeper into my new life, the tension between my past and future became palpable. I dedicated myself to understanding the societal structures that perpetuated deception, and through prayer and study, I sought deeper connections with those who felt the same urgency. The urgency saturated my being. It wasn't just about me, it was about a community struggling against the shadows of ignorance and manipulation. Gathering with those who shared this awakening felt like gathering strength against the tides of adversity. I realized that together we could stand firm against the hidden agendas that sought to keep us divided. The path ahead loomed large, filled with uncertainty, yet in my heart, I knew I was on a mission to bring truth to light, not only for myself, but for everyone still ensnared in the web of deception. In a climactic fusion of courage and liberation, I embraced my mission, determined to openly share my faith in Jesus. The journey to this moment was anything but simple. As a Quran teacher in a community that revered strict adherence to tradition, the prospect of proclaiming my new beliefs felt daunting. Yet, after my near-death experience and the profound revelations I received, I knew I could no longer remain silent. The spiritual war one had faced within myself had galvanized me. It was time to stand firm in my truth, to reveal the love and freedom I had discovered. As I began to speak out, I felt a mixture of exhilaration and terror. I found opportunities to share my testimony in small gatherings, where potential allies might understand my struggles. Each time I recounted my encounter with Jesus, I witnessed the power of vulnerability, how honesty could bring others closer to their own understanding of faith. People listened with rapt attention as I described the hidden agenda that seeks to manipulate our beliefs. I spoke of the elite who profit from division, using deception to keep us from uniting in love and compassion. With each revelation shared, I hoped to inspire a collective awakening that would challenge the status quo. However, the path was fraught with challenges. Admitting my newfound faith publicly placed me at risk of backlash from my community, making the threat of rejection a constant companion. When I returned home after one particularly emotional gathering, I sat in silence, my heart heavy with the weight of what I had shared. I feared the accusations of betrayal and heresy that were bound to follow. The love I longed to extend to my family conflicted starkly with their unwavering adherence to tradition, creating a chasm that seemed impossible to bridge. As I reflected on my life's journey, I couldn't help but wonder if the price of truth would be too high. Despite the turmoil, I remained resolute that my mission was one of love, not confrontation. Each statement of faith I made reinforced my conviction that Jesus' message was meant for everyone, even those still trapped in the chains of deception. I began to engage in conversations that would encourage dialogue rather than division. I reached out to those questioning their beliefs, offering them a space to explore their doubts without fear. My heart ached for the many souls silently suffering under the weight of expectations, clinging to traditions that no longer served them. The urgency of our spiritual awakening was more pressing than ever. I felt compelled to guide others toward liberation, But in the midst of this awakening, I realized I needed to fortify my own spirit for the battles that lay ahead. The stakes were high, and though the threat of persecution loomed large, I understood that I could not abandon my mission. I sought guidance through prayer, yearning for clarity and strength to face a world that might not accept the truth I had uncovered. I knew the road would be long and fraught with challenges, but Jesus had illuminated my path, igniting a flame of hope within me. As I prepared to step further into this new calling, my heart felt both heavy and light, aware of the suffering I might face, yet buoyed by the truth that called me deeper into an awakening, urging me to press on despite the uncertainty. Years later, I found myself living in a refuge dedicated to my mission, a space where I could freely share my faith and the truths I had uncovered. The once shocking transformation from Quran teacher to follower of Jesus became the core of my identity. I had shared my testimony countless times, and each time it struck a chord with someone reaching for hope. The faces of those I had inspired lingered in my mind, their heartfelt gratitude grounding me in purpose. I understood that my journey wasn't just for me. It was a calling to aid others trapped in the spiritual war so prevalent in our world today. With every story I shared, I could feel the weight of my past receding. I spoke passionately about the hidden agendas that plague our society, the ways in which the elite manipulate fear and division to maintain control over the masses. My words resonated with those who listened because they could sense the urgency behind them. My encounters with Jesus had revealed not only truths about spirituality, but also a stark realization about how systems could uphold deception rather than foster genuine belief. I became a beacon of hope for those who felt alone in their struggles, encouraging them to question the narratives they had been fed. Despite the progress I had made, the ache for reconciliation with my family remained a constant in my heart. I often reflected on the love I had for them and the pain of their rejection. They saw my faith as a betrayal, and each time I tried to speak with them, I felt the gulf between us grow wider. The fear of losing them still lingered, but I also knew that my awakening held the potential to reach them one day. I prayed for the courage to share the truths that had set me free, hoping that it might spark a change in their hearts too. What if they could see how love and acceptance could transcend our differences? I thought. As I continued on this path, I also recognized the importance of supporting others in their spiritual journeys. I worked tirelessly to nurture a community where those experiencing similar awakenings could come together. We discussed not just our own revelations, but also the challenges we faced in a society that often misunderstands faith. Together we explored the conflicts between tradition and truth, molding our understanding of spirituality into something more expansive and inclusive. Each meeting felt electric, filled with the possibility of transformation and healing. My testimony became a call to arms against the forces of deception that still held so many captive. It felt essential to remind people that while religion could confine, the truth had the power to liberate. I often reminded my fellow seekers that we had to be vigilant, aware of the manipulations around us. The spiritual awakening I had experienced was not a singular event, but an ongoing journey, one that required continuous commitment, reflection, and action. I understood that the road ahead might be fraught with challenges, but as I pressed on, there was an undeniable promise of redemption, a hope that steadily fueled my mission and carried me forward. The fight against the hidden agendas of our world was just beginning, and I felt the stirring of conviction urging me to embrace my role in this profound narrative. As we conclude this chapter of my journey, I urge you to consider one profound question. What truths lie hidden in your own heart, waiting to be discovered? Perhaps you've felt the stirrings of something beyond tradition, a yearning for connection that transcends the ordinary. The light that illuminated my path in that dark desert is within you too. Are you prepared to confront the shadows that cloud your understanding? We find ourselves navigating a world rife with invisible battles. Beneath the surface of our lives, a spiritual war is unfolding, one that seeks to bind us in fear and division. The truth awaits eager hearts, calling us to wake up from our slumber of compliance. Just as I was called to share my revelations, I encourage you to join me in this collective awakening. Your voice matters. Your experience matters. Together, we can create a ripple of truth that resonates far beyond our individual journeys. If this message has stirred something deep within you, don't let it go unanswered. Subscribe to Truth from Beyond and activate the notification bell so you won't miss the unfolding revelations that are set to ignite your spirit further. Join us on this path of exploration, where each testimony offers a glimpse into deeper truths that break the chains of deception and empower us to walk in love. In our next video, we will delve into a transformative story of another seeker who encountered the divine in a life-altering way. You won't want to miss it. Remember, I'm Hamza, and thank you for sharing this moment with me. Take the courage to seek your truth, for the light will always guide those who dare to look beyond the veil. Until next time, keep searching, keep believing, and keep awakening.